Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Today, we're from Group 2. We're gonna present about the recognition of government and belligerent community. My name is NADAN RABBANI, and I'm gonna present the recognition of government. Recognition of government is a political action that is done by the states to recognize a government as their governing states. So, recognition of government comes in two forms. The first one is de facto. This recognition is usually temporary when there's only one able governing body that can govern a state. The second one is de jure. De jure is full recognition from the international world. This recognition is given when the governing body is mostly stable. The effect of government recognition is when a government body has been recognized through de facto, it can only dabbles in domestic affairs. If it's been recognized through de jure or by the international world, it can actually engage in international affairs and they can actually ratify and pass international treaty. Not only that, the governing body can conquer foreign assets and actually represent their country in international organization. For the legal basis of government recognition, there's no actual legal basis on international treaty that exclusively states about government recognition, but it is shaped through the international customary law, which look at a few criteria, which is the effectiveness of a government and the legitimacy of the government. Thank you.
So, I will be explaining about the belligerents. What is a belligerence? So, belligerence is a group within a party to a non-international armed conflict, with an example given as a rebellion or civil war that has achieved a certain level of territorial control organization so that it is recognized by international law as a lawful combatant. For example, the United States and China during the Korean conflict, where both nations were engaged in armed conflict even without a formal declaration of war, thus earning belligerent status under the international law. So, why are they being called a belligerent group? It is because a belligerent is a nation that has put up with a group or entity that is actively engaged in war or armed conflict. And this status also can apply to factions within a civil war, provided they meet certain legal and practical criteria, such as holding territory and observing the laws of war. Now, moving on, the difference within belligerents and insurgent is that insurgent is not recognized, which is the insurgent is only happen to be in the domestic rebellion, while belligerence is recognized by the international and global law. Moving on, so the things for a belligerent group is to be recognized by the international law is they have to put up with the Hague Convention of 1907 and the Geneva Convention of 1949. So this regulate the conduct of warfare, establishing rules for how to fight and the use of certain weapons, while the Geneva Conventions of 1949 protect the victims of war, namely civilians, prisoners of war, and the wounded and sick. And the others, they have to put up with the Article 3 in the connection with the Geneva Convention of 1949, like I said before. And the last one is they have to practice of recognition of belligerency. Now moving on to the terms of belligerent recognition. So firstly, the groups permanently control part of the territory. So without having to invest, or they have to intervene the other parts of territory, they have to only control their own, so that they have this recognition of being noticed as belligerents. Secondly, the group's government has a clear structure. So the structure from the head to toe had to be very, very clear, where they divided themselves to a different and fair works. Thirdly, the conflict is intense and prolonged. So it has to be like a big and intense conflict instead of it's a small conflict that's happening. And lastly, the legitimate government or state recognizes the belligerent status, or a third state recognizes it for purposes of neutrality. Now moving on, we are looking for the legal impact of conventions, which is there are two legal impacts. So first one is the rights and obligations under the laws of war, or we can call it IHL. And this includes must comply with the rules of war. So that means that the treatment of prisoners, civilians, and etc., it has to follow up with the rules of war. Secondly, be treated as a legitimate party to the conflict. And then the other legal impact, the second legal impact, is political consequences. So they have to put up with the recognition of belligerency can be seen as an indirect recognition of the political legitimacy of the group. The recognizing state might be accused of interfering in the internal affairs of another state. So conclusion, the recognition of belligerency is a legal and political tool between the legitimacy of war and the recognition of legitimacy.
For my part, I'm gonna explain some real examples of belligerent recognition in international law. The first one is the American Civil War, which happened from 1861 to 1865. This war was between the Union, which was the official US government, and the Confederate States, a group of southern states that wanted to separate and make their own country. At first, the US government said, "This is not a war, it's just a rebellion." But as time went on, the fight got huge. Both sides had organized armies, leaders, and even controlled territories. Because of how serious the conflict became, other countries like Britain and France decided to declare neutrality. Now, this actually meant something big. It meant that they recognized both sides as belligerent. So, even though they didn't support either side, they admit that a real war was happening and the laws of war should apply. The recognition allowed both sides to follow rules like fair treatment for prisoners, blockades on ports, and how to deal with captured soldiers. But it's important to know this didn't mean that Britain or France recognized the Confederacy as an independent country. They were just saying, okay, this is clearly a real war, and both sides have responsibilities under international law. When the Union won in 1865, the recognition ended automatically, and this case became a really important example for international law, showing that even a civil war inside the country can be treated like a war between nations if it's big and organized enough. The next example is the Korean conflict, which happened between 1950 and 1953. This war started when North Korea invaded South Korea. After that, the United States and the United Nations helped South Korea while China sent soldiers to help North Korea. What's interesting here is that both sides were fighting massive battles with full military forces, but nobody officially declared war. The US called it a UN police action, and China said their troops were just volunteers. Even though they avoided the word war, their actions clearly met all the conditions of belligerency. They had organized troops, controlled land, and fought big battles. So legally, they were belligerents even without the title of war. that means the laws of war still applied. Things like protecting civilians, treating prisoners properly, and respecting neutral countries. This shows that under international law, you don't need to say it's a war for it to be treated like one. If the situation already looks like a real war, then the law of war automatically applies. So from both of those examples, the American Civil War and the Korean conflict, we can see that belligerent recognition isn't about politics or supporting one side. It's about making sure that when a serious conflict happens, there are still rules to protect people and make sure both sides act responsibility. Okay, that's all from us, from Group 2. Thank you very much for listening, and we apologize if there's still a lot of mistakes that we say on the video. We're waiting for you guys to comment down below for the questions. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.